Namaskar. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. A bit of problem here. Anyway. Namaskar, everybody. I welcome one and all to this Sunday webinar of Philosophy Family. We have with us Dr. Rekha Ojha and Professor Anurima Bhattacharya. Dr. Rekha Ojha will be speaking on writings on women, a feminist perspective in the first session, and Professor Anurima Bhattacharya will be speaking on the culmination of logic and metaphysics in the philosophy of Hegel in the second session. Well, before inviting Dr. Roja to deliver a lecture, I just would like to inform to the members of the family that Dr. Ojha is currently working as an assistant professor in philosophy in Vishwabharati Santiniketan, and she has a lot of interest in feminist philosophy, and she has written 5 books taking into account various issues on women, and this is her strength, I think. And today too, she will be delivering a lecture under the title "Writings on Women." So definitely, it would be greatly helpful to all of us. So, and she's also working under as a principal investigator in the ICPR on alternate Ojha. Well, some issues with my connectivity. Yes, madam. Some issues with my connectivity.
Yes.
Yes, could I reach you, madam? Well, welcome, madam. Please.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Actually, there are some
Can you
network
hear
issues.
me? Am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, madam. Clear, madam. Now audible. Audible, madam.
Okay. Okay. Very good evening to one and all present here. And I'm very much thankful to Professor Pramod Das, who has taken the initiative to bring almost all the faculty member from philosophy in one platform. And very beautiful name he has given, that is philosophy family. And his dedication towards this work are clearly visible in his WhatsApp messages, which is sometime around 12 o'clock at night also. So I'm really thankful for his hard work, and I wish him all the success of bringing like 100% of this faculty of philosophy faculty in one platform. In one day, I think we will all be together in this platform. So I wish him all the success. And I must take one name here, that is Dr. Shailendra Kumar, Assistant Professor from Magadh University, who has introduced me with Professor Pramod Das, and this is how I am here. So my thanks goes to him too. And I'm also thankful to the coordinator, Dr. K.C. Maharana, and moderator, Dr. Om N. Rao. And my regards to Professor Anurima Bhattacharya. Okay, so let me begin with my, without any late, let me begin with my presentation. As the title is already been said, let me repeat the title again. Writings on Women, a Feminist Perspective. I hope I am audible.
Clear, madam. Clear. Clear. Audible. Audible. Clear. Audible, madam.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We had heard the lecture of Professor Hamidullah Maranji on feminism, religion, and philosophy maybe 2 weeks he had very elaborately analyzed philosophical aspect of feminism and also focus on different views of feminist philosopher. So I would not repeat the same. Rather today, I would like to highlight on feminist literary issues and will try to compare the writings of both men and women about women's writing. I mean, male and female writers on women's writing. Now, women's writing and them as the vindication of rights of women, second sex, laugh of Medusa, the rights of one's own, all engage as a response to particular waves of feminism. From gynocentrism to radical feminism, all were initially received with suspicious and criticism as they questioned and challenged the long held tradition of power relations. The same fight can be seen in other feminist philosophical writing too, as they depict the concept of emancipation of women. Many critics believe that because men and women have different life experience, the writing of male and female author will differ as well. So believe that male authors are not able to write accurately from female perspective or present feminist ideals because they have not experienced life as women. The majority of time, life from female point of view is portrayed in literature by women author, but male author have also taken on female perspectives. When writing about women, it is possible that author will describe them differently depending on gender, nationality, culture, and there are so many other factors. To explore this problem, I have measured the depiction of women in two writings by male and female writers from Indian culture. I know that these two writings are not enough to clear this view that whether male can be a good feminist or female can only be the feminist. But since the paucity of time, I have just taken the two writer here and their two writings. By studying this primary texts and analyzing secondary sources too about the writing style of men and women, as well as the way in which women are characterized in this writing, I have just gained the understanding into the question of whether the gender of author affects the way he or she writes about women, or you can say represent women in their writing. So there is a question mark, and this questions I am dealing with this in this whole paper. Now, gender play an important role in the life of human beings, starting at the movement of their birth when they are given a blue dress or a pink dress and sent forward on a path that will turn them into their culture consider proper man or proper woman. From the very first breath, humans are taught to follow a strict code of behavior that differs depending on their sex. In a patriarchal society like India, this often means that a male will lead a privileged life in which he is taught to be the standard of human experience, and the female will lead a subjugated, subservient life in which she is defined only in relation to males. Even in, you can see in the languages also, we are seeing that how the languages are related like man, woman. Forcing man and woman to fit into gender role is damaging as it leads to the belief that these roles represent truth, causing gender stereotype to endure. It also forces men and women to experience life only from their point of view as men or women, but not as human beings. Now, we can say that if art is a reflection of life, then one would suppose that literature would present world in which these gender roles exist and women experience life far differently from men and suffer because of it. Gender roles are hard to dispel, but some male authors have attempted to see life from women's perspective. I have examined the depiction of women by male author to see whether or not these stereotypes persist and if the male author give an accurate reflection of the woman's experience. In addition, I try to study the representation of women in literature by female authors, both as comparison to male author and to answer the question of whether or not female authors can automatically be defined as feminist. So these are my points. Uh, uh, Let me okay, define as feminist. Let me discuss some of the theories related to this feminist theories. The majority of feminist theorists are women. However, I try to find out here a male who discussed men who writes from the female perspective. Alan Williamson is the famous name here. He is the author of the famous book Love and the Soul. Explain his ideas in the introduction of his book, Almost a Girl, Male Writers and Female Identification. He emphasized on the difficulties that many male authors have with writing from the female viewpoint. He writes first about gender issues, certain emotional, certain basic human motives, including narcissistic display, intense awareness of one's body, tender self-surrender, are typed by you can say by culture as feminine. So the men who experience them, or especially who find them predominant in his own psyche makeup, may faces a crisis of gender identity. The men Williamson described may also feel shame at not being accepted as real men because of their ability to identify with women. If men do not fit into their prescribed gender role, then they will not be seen as true member or of their sex, and same with the female. Another issue that male authors deal with is a backslash from the feminist. Williamson admit that in the past, feminist ideas from men serve as propaganda, thus producing suspicious from women that lingers still today. He criticized feminist critics, stating feminist criticism has felt the need to emphasize how hard it is for men really to imagine what women experience. Whenever male writers attempt to represent a female point of view, they fear that they will perpetuate stereotype, offer up a straw man or rather straw woman, so that the patriarchal side can have the last word, or at best, still inside women's writer deserve the chance to express for themselves. Williamson feels that today male authors are still being held accountable for the way in which past male authors use feminist ideas against women, as we know about Plato, and there are so many Kant. This is a gloomy idea because if today's feminist critics are not willing to look beyond past mistakes, they are preventing themselves from reading and studying literature that would offer new understanding of the sexes. This kind of thinking only reinforces gender role that can be as damaging to men as they are to women. If men continue to be seen as patriarchal and sexist, then they may never see themselves as anything different and may resist change, thinking it is useless. Now, Williamson also notes that many of the female identified male author he has studied have actually been very unhappy with the real woman in their own life. To explain, he cited the work of Jessica Benjamin, who focuses on the psychology of female identified male writers. Benjamin feels that understanding the Electra complex or narcissism, which is also called Oedipal stage, which is described a child feeling of desire for opposite sex parents and jealous and anger towards their same sex parents, allowing understanding of the male author as a whole. Now, during this Electra complex stage, commonality between son and mother exists, which includes emotional attunement, sharing a state of mind, empathically assuming the other's position, and imaginatively perceiving the other's needs and feeling. These are character traits which are commonly associated with women during the Oedipal stage. The male child possesses this trait in relation to his mother. However, once this Electra complex or Oedipal stage is over, the male must identify with his father and his masculine side, which leads to grief over the lost bond with his mother. The male child either turns this grief into anger, which is the negative side, or he tries to regain the bond he shared with his mother by re-identifying with women, which is the positive effect. Now, writing from the female perspective allows male author to achieve re-identification. Laurie St. Martin, yes, it's Laurie St. Martin, a literary theorist, write in the introduction to his essay, A Feminist Reading, a feminist reading of contemporary male writers, that she believes male authors sometimes act out their aggression towards real life women or the feminist movement on female character in their works. Again, writing become an outlet for emotions that develop after the Oedipal stage. Saint Martin does not, she noted, like Williamson, that other male authors do portray women honestly, while Williamson described the motives behind female identified male author. The majority of female theorists do not offer explanation for male writers as he does. In the essay, The Blank Page and Issues of Female Creativity, Susan Goober state that male writers often use their writings as the way to create women the way they would like them to be created. Women are the blank page upon which the male writers writes. In other words, the female is not yet complete until the male author has finished her. If the male sees a female as a blank page, she is never the creator, nor does she have the power to create herself. Another theorist, J. Kagan Gardiner, bases her theories on gender in literary criticism on differences in the life experience of men and women. Like Williamson, she believed that men and women live differently because of their sexes. Therefore, these gender differences will be reflected in their writing. In her essay on female identified and writings by women, Gardiner stated that women's experiences differ from men's in profound and regular way. She explained further, in a male-dominated society, being a man means not being like a woman. As a result, the behavior considered appropriate to each gender becomes severely restricted and separated. Gardiner believed that these differences in experience will be apparent in their writing too. She gives example of characteristics of women's writing that differs from men's writing, repeated imagery and distinctive concept. For example, imagery of detention and unemotional descriptions of childcare. As for men's writing, male fictions often split character into disjunct fragments, while female character in novel by women tend to dissolve and merge into each other. Finally, she states that female identity is a process. Gender influence development of the personality, which in turn impact writing. Other theorists believe that male author may initially seems as though they are feminist in their writing, but that is not always the case. In the introduction to the book, very famous book, Out of Bond, Male Writers and Gender Criticism, editor Laura Claridge Elizabeth and Langland writes that for to write against patriarchy as a male fettered by it does not necessarily result in writing for liberation of gender bondage, a primary aim of philosophical and practical feminism. Feminists tend to imply a political agenda with deep analysis. The reader may discover that the male author may have his own agenda in mind rather than a feminist one. Many feminist critics believe that male authors writes inadequately from the female perspective. Therefore, it is not surprising that they believe that women are more capable of writing from female perspective. As with male authors, many theorists believe that identity is also very important when discussing female authors. Susan Guber believed that men see women as blank pages, but that women sometimes also see themselves in this way, using writing to recreate themselves. The female author is deeply involved in her work because it is often considered a kind of a reshaping of herself, whereas the male author is creating something outside of himself. Now, J. Kagan Gardiner also emphasized identity as being an important factor in women's writing, just as Williamson had a theory about the way male identity is formed. Gardiner has one about the formation of female identity and its relation to literature. She explained very beautifully that female identity formation is depend on mother-daughter bond. The maternal metaphor of female authorship clarify the woman writer's distinctive engagement with her character and indicate an analogous relationship between woman reader and character. In other words, the female author often see her female protagonist as a daughter, and woman reader will recognize this in the text, relating it to their own identity, which has been formed because of mother-daughter bond. In addition, she believes the woman writer used her text, particularly one centering on the female heroes, or you can say heroines, as part of a continuing process involving her own self-definition and her empathetic identification with her character. Now, it is very clear that Gardiner believes that women's writers are much more attuned to their writing as well as their female audience or female readers, because it is representative of themselves. Another female theorist, Annie Pratt, focuses on the way in which gender roles affects the way woman writes in her book, Archetypical Pattern in Women's Fiction. She writes women's fiction reflect on experience radically different from men's, because our drive towards growth as person is thwarted by our society's prescriptions concerning gender. Pratt believed that gender roles are not only oppressive to women in real life, but in literature as well. She strongly argued that the effect of patriarchy are apparent in novel written by women. She writes that in women's novel, there is a clear sense that we, women, are outcasts in the land, that we have neither a homeland of our own nor an ethnic place within society. She continued adding, our quest for quoting her, our quest for being are thwarted on every side by what we are told to be and to do, which is different from that men are told to be and men are told to do. We can assume that Pratt means to say here that awareness of male dominated society would not be present in novel written by male author because they have not been negatively affected by it in the real life. And if one belonged to an elite class, he assumed his experience to be the experience of everyone. While women novels, women's novel do often reflect the oppression of women and its effect. She recognizes the desire to overcome this oppression as well. She writes for the 300 years the women's writings have been a respiratory of not merely horror but hopes. Literary Feminism by Ruth Robbins also discuss female writers. She begin with some history of female writers. She writes that writing become an acceptable occupation for women because it didn't overshadow her domestic duties. She was allowed to create female characters that were assertive and independent in a fictitious world while remaining a wife and mother in the real life. However, Robbins point out self-expression was mediated through the lens of whatever ideologies of femininity were current at a given moment. Robbins followed the theory of social construction, which state that everything, even personal identity, is influenced and formed by interaction with members in one society. This means that if a woman writer had never been exposed to feminism, it would not be a part of her identity and therefore not evident in in her writing too. While literature offered an escape to women's writer, progressive feminist ideas were not always present. To further explain, Robbins stated that the image we see or read about are part of the context in which we live. A large amount of feminist literature theory has focused on past female-centered novel by men rather than contemporary one. If past work by female didn't always have feminist theme, then past work by male author mostly likely would not either. Society's views of women have changed and gender role are not as strictly enforced. This can be seen through the second wave of feminism, which occurred in the United States alongside the civil rights movement. If these ideas weren't already present in the society, then they wouldn't be found in the writing of that time. It only makes sense that past novels will reflect different ideas about women than today's novel. If modern feminists focus on contemporary novel by male author, one can assume that their conclusion would be different. In addition, Robbins agreed with many other feminist critics that inaccurate portrayal of women in literature are detrimental. She discussed Mary Wollstonecraft, whose A Vindication of Rights of Women is considered to be one of the first feminist writing. Robbins writes, for Mary Wollstonecraft, the prevalence of misconceived representation of women as a meek, obedient, passive, pretty was an evil because such representation had real effect in the development of real women's life. Again, social construction play a part here. If women read patriarchal accounts, they may admit them as truth and even change their belief about women. It is especially dangerous if women write patriarchal writing because women reader may think that all women feel that way and again submit to gender stereotype. Now, finally, the way in which writings are perceived by reader depend on the sex of the author. Males have often been taught to represent universal experience. J. Keegan Gardiner quote another critic, Carolyn Helbrim, who stated that Women novelists assume only a man can stand for the full range of human experience, moving through action and quest to achievement or failure. This stereotype can be very damaging to women authors, as they may feel as though they are incapable of writing stories about life and meaning and may not try it. If reader believe this stereotype, they will have prejudgment about the text, and the author's ability and gender role will never evolve. Now, another detrimental stereotype is that male authors are assumed to write about truth and meaning, while female authors are assumed only to describe experiences. If this were true, I would argue that women have never been allowed to live the kind of life in which truth could be discovered. In many novels by men in which the search for meaning is the focus, the male protagonist is independent and goes out into the world alone to discover what life is and what meaning it holds. Women who had lived subservient experience are taught to put others first, especially their husband, their children. And if a woman doesn't, then she is considered incomprehensible for abandoning her family. If woman is not encouraged or allowed to lead the kind of life that foster the discovery of truth, she will never be able to create her own meaning or meaning that other might accept as their own, that is the reader. Now, to further illustrate my point, I have chosen Rabindranath Tagore as male author and Anita Desai as female author. The two writing that I have choose here are Rabindranath Tagore's The Wife's Letter. Rather, Rabindranath Tagore and Anita Desai has written many of the stories, dramas, and all where they have projected women. But since the time limit is just 1 hour, so I have just taken two here. That is Rabindranath Tagore's The Wife's Letter from collection called Golpo Gucho, written in 1914, and the novel Cry the Peacock, written by Anita Desai in 1963. Now, Rabindranath Tagore, as we all know, it's Asian first Nobel laureate who is a vital and convincing figure in the world of Bengali literature. Tagore's writing, especially his novel and short stories, bring out the erased portion, you can say, erased portions of women's experience and show tremendous consideration and understanding towards the plight of women, which was quite an unfamiliar trend for most work of that period. I'm talking about 1930s of that centuries. Controversial issues such as remarriage of Hindu widows, co-creations, the women education, the need for female, the need for late marriage, their emancipation, and the oppression caused through social injustice have found significant place in his writing. Thus, his writing are a valuable document of societal change in its relation to the large social context of gender, nation, politics. His female character come from diverse social setting and are inspirational as they struggle for space and autonomy. Through his work, Tagore is seen to break the false conventions of his society and thus liberating women from their bondage. Tagore has pointed out women's loneliness and imprisonment as a result of monotonous life of domesticity and economic reliability. In the short fiction, The Wife's Letter, from the collection called Golpo Gucho, we find Mrinal is the main character here, Mrinal to fight for her suppressed identity covered under the identity of Mejobo. Mejobo, it is the Bangla term. Mejobo means the wife of second brother. This transformation from being a wife to a male lineage to an independent woman does not happen all of a sudden, you can say. Tagore gives an extremely plausible explanation in which he records Mrinal's reaction through her own voice and her coming out of her marital bond, which is the symbolic in many sense. Not only Mrinal comes out of her family or the lens or the house in particular, she comes out of the long sustained cycle of patriarchy as well. The Wife's Letter is a wonderful story written in epistolary form, told from the perspective of self educated married woman, Mrinal, who examined her position and her identity within and without her marriage. You know, Mrinal opens the narratives through a letter addressing to her husband, explaining and making statement on the cause of her departure from her marriage, which was considered as a sacred realm for women. Unlike the other female character from Tagore's short stories, Mrinal is shown to have intense power and self-confidence in choosing own fate and identity. She is portrayed as an educated woman whose way of thinking and judgments are very different against gender subjugation and violence. Women education in 19th century was not appreciated. Education for women was long abhorred and discouraged as it was taught to ruin marital harmony. It was a belief that a woman who are educated, they should not be married because they break the family. The general notion was that education will give women the power to question injustice done to them. It could break the stigmatized mind set up of women who believe men to be superior and powerful. Mrinal in the wife's letter, and as I said, there are so many characters. There is another character that is Charulata too. These two characters writes in their own truth, and it is their writing that question patriarchal ability, which we find in Tagore's writing, and he presented very beautifully. In the very beginning, we have seen that Mrinal to get married only for her beauty, but not for her talent and intelligence. In the long term of her relationship with her husband and in-laws, there is a huge gap between their thought and logic. As she had no child to bear and she is unable to bear one, there is a maternity need in her. And when she gets Bindu, Bindu is another woman character here, as a submissive and violated girl, her motherhood and womanhood upraises. Bindu, a girl of 14 years, has no one but elder brother who has exploited her. She is just an ordinary girl before which she lost her value of being a nice and kind-hearted woman. Mrinal cultivated this ordinary girl who quickly became an eyesore for the whole family, including her own elder sister. Everyone is eager to disgrace her out of the house. This girl named Bindu got chicken pox once and all try to banish her out of the house. But then Mrinal uprises her voice to look after her. All the thoughts, logics, and question that Mrinal dealt with has nothing to do with her husband, as he never tried to understand her. The name tag of this Mejo Bo was given because of the relation with her husband, but when she was fighting for the dignity and life of Bindu, she found no one beside her. Even her companion husband went against her. The starting and end of the letter clarifies all this. In the beginning, Mrinal stated to thin specious lotus fit, but when she ended describing all her sufferings, humiliation, and disagreement with the family, she announced her leave. The decision of breaking the relationship down, she ends with saying, removed from the shelter of your feet, which is strong irony on the face of patriarchy. Girls under Hindu patriarchal domination on that time could have the only identity of their husband. Husband's house was supposed to be their own house, and they were always meant to abide by the decision of their husband and in-laws. Mrinal's letters to her husband was a result of her suffering, submissiveness in the in-laws' house for years. With contravening all the relationship with her husband, Mrinal clarified her need to write a letter to the husband, which is an indicator of the gap between the two of them. She was so disgusted to her husband and in-laws that she risked her only identity of being a married woman and come out of the shelter. Brinal opted for going on pilgrimage to Puri while her husband was back in Kolkata after his office work. She also stated that the letter is not from their daughter-in-law, I mean Mejobo, but from a woman who has a self-governing relation with the world and its interior. She affirmed that it is not the end of her life to step front forward the world, because death takes only the valuable being, and she got nothing from the society and hardly considered as valuable. Society can abandon a person, a woman, but God never abandoned his creation. She made her point clear by saying that she not merely a girl anymore, no more just a female cousin of her father's nephew, no longer only a lunatic stranger deceived wife. Now she is without limit, without end. Now here we can also find the dimension of woman-woman relationship. Tagore has portrayed it very beautifully. It comes out in the form of relationships shared by Mrinal and Bindu. It is the relation of emotion and identity. The arrival of Bindu actually gives a new way to Mrinal to think out of the boundaries of her in-laws, the dark nature of the people in the society, of regarding beauty of a woman has a beauty of a woman as more important rather than intellect of a woman. Women are given value on the basis of her beauty. They are presented as an object. They are a kind, like a plate full of fruits to be served before the husband and in-laws. In the case of Bindu, she is strictly being banished by giving marriage to a mad person. As for the people of her black shade, deserve nothing more than that, because she was dark and not so beautiful. She is a matter to get used and utilized as a worker of household. After a long passage of time, Mrinal planned an escape for Bindu from her so-called in-laws with the help of her brother. His name was Sarat. But it seems too late, because by that time Bindu had already burned herself. Now, actually, it is not a suicide, but a murder of womanhood in the so-called patriarchal society, which Tagore wants to project, which is full of violence and mental frustration, which indicate itself as a caretaker of the society but kill its values. For Minal, this death is the celebration of life. It is the death of body and the mind. It is the death of the body, she says, and mind, and the independence of the soul that binds Mrinal and Bindu in the final run. Dependency or independency depend on the person and his or her situation. It's clearly indicated here. Now, Mrinal's husband is another instance of male supremacy that we can see dominated by his family. The presence of power relation is seen here. Being a woman, Bindu is abused and tortured a lot by her cousin in her own house. On the other side, we see that throughout the novel, we can see that Mrinal pointing out and criticizing all the wrong deed done by her husband and in-laws. Every time she is seen to fight along for righteousness and for Bindu's justice, then every time we can see her fighting, not keeping herself quiet. Mrinal reveals the true color of Hindu patriarchy through her narratives, which question the custom of public morality valued by the educated middle class woman or middle class family. Now let's come to the second narrative, second story by Anita Desai. Anita Desai is one of the considerable voice in the modern Indian English fiction. She is regarded as an Indian novelist, short story writers, and even children's stories. Also, she has written many, and the winner of Sahitya Academy Award and Guardian Children's Fiction Prize. Desai has written 16 work of friction. Some of the best one is Fasting of Day, The Village Boy by C, In Custodian, and Clear Light of the Day. Desai won many award and recognition for her work and was shortlisted for Booker Prize twice. The novel I have taken here from Desai, that is Cry the Peacock. She has written that in 1963, is a faithful description of psychosomatic growth of female character, which cannot cope up with the patriarchal world of the husband and feel dejected. Now, I have taken the similar story so that we can compare the both. Now, Cry the Peacock is mainly concerned with the disharmony between husband and wife relationship, the incompatible temperament between Gautam and Maya. Gautam and Maya is the main character here. Gautam is the husband, Maya is the wife. Result because of their tension, Maya is poetic, high-strung, dreamy, sensitive, and emotional, while Gautam is realistic, insensitive, rational, hard, and detached. Maya and Gautam are poles apart, and lack of interaction between them lead to loneliness. There is a breakdown in the communication, and Maya gets isolated and detached. The matrimonial bonds that bind the two are very fragile and tenuous. The growing tension between them reaches its climax when Maya kills Gautam and then commits suicide. Now, the novel opened with a depiction of husband's wife alienations and discord by exposing the relationship of the prominent character Maya and Gautam. The protagonist Maya is obsessed with the fear of death as a consequence of an astrological prediction that one of the spouse will die in 14 years of their marriage. She cannot establish any effective communication with her husband. Gautam, who is detached, rational, and twice of her age, her husband does not understand her feelings and grows her sense of alienations and isolation, and consequently, she kills him in a fit of intense anger. In the novel, the protagonist Maya receives hostility and indifference rather than delicacy and affection. In this novel, Desai presents the silence, solitude, and dark world of shadows in Maya's life. Prabhakar Pandey, a famous critic, rightly says that Maya's tragedy is that there is no one to share her feeling. Childless, with uncaring husband, she is lonely, and loneliness is the ban and burden of her psyche. And to cap it all, she is not even sexually satisfied. After all, it is the loneliness that separates them from each other. Maya seems to cherish a continuous longing for something which she never attained. The prediction of the astrologer shocked her a lot. The prediction was that one of them would die after 4 years of their marriage. She is haunted by this prediction of albino priest. As a feminist writer, Desai introduces the theme of women's freedom in her novel. Her young woman character yearned for freedom, but quite unfortunately, none of her character could free themselves from bondage, which I have seen in her stories. Now, Desai woman character are always seen hypersensitive, lonely, and helpless, and they are tormented by the patriarchal domination. One of the writers says that a feminist novel is not just one that deals with women and women's issue, but it should also possess some aspect of feminist ideology. Desai early novel best illustrated that they are feminist novel. D.S. Maini has rightly pointed out that Cry the Peacock is typically a feminine novel, a novel of sensibility rather than of action. The characters sometimes react strongly and sometimes sensitively to the male dominated society. She writes about sensitive of the woman in an insensitive male world. Her theme is the existential predicament in the present social milieu, where the male is the ruler and the female is ruled over. Desai challenges the image of Indian woman stereotype, especially of the middle class woman. Most of our women are housewives, but they are unhappy one way or the other. Feminism is an ideology of women's liberation, and Anita Desai is awakened and conscious about the woman's life and problem. In one of her interview with the Hindu, Elfric Jelinek, the Nobel Prize winner of literature in 2004, when she was asked about her reaction on being addressed as a feminist writer, she comments, as an intellectual woman, one can only be a feminist. Of course, feminism is a stereotype with which one demolish all uncomfortable and unpleasant achievement of women. It is easy to be a part of a general opinion and then to joke about these women. The patriarchal system that still prevails has a power to make fun of every woman whom they don't like. Now, Anita Desai's novel work through a feminine consciousness. She has by and large written about woman character, and it's preoccupied with the theme of incompatible marital couples. Through many characters, Anita Desai uphold a new vista of feminist writing. Maya, in her character in this Cry Peacock, stand apart from all the women. Oh, yes, all the women character in the novel. Okay. Can you give me another 5 minutes? I will just conclude. So this is how she portrayed her suffering and the luxury suffering, but the demand. Okay, let me come here. The gloomy affairs state of affair is unacceptable by Maya, and hence she eases her tension psychology by thinking how peacock stem its feet on the strike against rock, and then how it seizes the snake to break its body, and this is how the name of the cry peacock is here. Now, through this murder and suicide, she experienced fulfillment and is relieved from the anxiety of past and the present dilemma. Now, Rabindranath Tagore and Anita Desai both are good at writing on the topic of feminism. They have followed liberal feminism here. In terms of liberal feminism, individual freedom gets more value. They don't discriminate between male and female person of the society, and they don't even make any inferior based on gender role. Individual freedom to speak, participate, react, etc. is the main concern of liberal feminism, which both of them portrayed. Now, there are many differences too in the work as well. The first is the language difference of both. Both the author, one is written in Bangla and one is written in English. These work also different in the way in which the woman acted after traumatic event. In the novel written by men, the woman makes very dramatic physical change in their life. They take action. Generally, we assume that in the woman writings, the protagonist actions aren't as drastic, but here we can see how drastic is Anita Desai's woman character. The character reaction, action versus acceptance after traumatic event depend on gender of the author seems to be an illusion. Now, generally, we believe that action is stereotypically male character, and in the writing of male author, the female protagonist embody the male trait of action. But this is not the case always. Therefore, I not only think that the male author I have studied here have accurately portrayed life from female perspective, but they sincerely portrayed the distress and the sense of loss felt by their female protagonist after traumatic event. Now, Rabindranath shows insight into the female mindset and the female world. He has successfully crossed the gender boundary lines. Now, I find that the male author have not written many writings exclusively from women's viewpoint. Some reason maybe, which I have already said, but which I find that men are really are not incapable of writing from female perspective, or they are fear that they will met with too much skepticism. Maybe this is the reason why they are not writing. And it is also possible that male author feel that they could be chastised for being too feminine and not fitting into the masculine gender role. The second discovery which I have made is that much of the research in this field is done by women. A simple reason would be that women would be considered the expert on the female race. However, it is possible that the male author would contribute to the research, but they may feel out of place or as if they don't have enough authority on the subject. Thirdly, the majority of feminist theorists have focused on past work of male author, although we still live in a patriarchal world. Society belief about women have changed over the course of time. Therefore, today's writing should reflect contemporary gender ideologies. If this is the case, I would say that feminist theorists are not being feared by disregarding recent work by male author. It is possible that the omission can simply be explained by the test of time, approached by literary criticism. However, I feel that it is detrimental to both male and women to continue to promote the idea that male writers or men in general, if the writers are assumed to be representative of their society, have not progressed since the Victorian age. Furthermore, focusing on point focusing on the past belief about gender causes traditional stereotype about men and women to endure as audience are influenced by what they really read. Lastly, that literary theory do not necessarily represent truth. Instead, they represent the reaction that one has to a text, the images and the ideas that is provoke. Studying theory help me and the other to understand gender from different viewpoint. However, I could not accept that everything I read was completely true. Finally, throughout my study, I kept in mind that gender is socially constructed and it represents accepted ideas about what is mean to be male and female. Gender roles can deter male writers from trying on the female persona, as well as influence the critics who may assume that male authors are unable to do so. In addition, strict gender ideals leave little room for difference, forcing reader to assume that all male writers are patriarchal and all female writers are feminist. As seen by my research, this is exactly not the case. Throughout my work, I am pleased to find that in the writing I have studied, men are capable of writing from female perspective in a way that is accurate, respectful, and progressive. This male author have strived to diminish gender role and stereotype by showing the way in which women can by damage of the patriarchal society and by creating positive female character. I hope that as more research is done on the contemporary male author who writes from the female perspective, the view of the critics will change and this small class will grow. With this hope, I am ending here. And thank you so much for this patient hearing. Thanks to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ojha, for a very nice lecture. Well, I'm not synopsizing, just I was to reflect on your the conclusion where you started with the proposition that male writers somehow fail to write on the feminist issues, and they fear for being not taken seriously, okay, or they fear of the skeptical attitude that they receive by the readers. But towards the end, the conclusion that you have reached that the distinction between male and female that is slowly vanishing out, and the male writers are also coming up with the feminist understanding the feminist issues, and they are writing on the subject with much more clarity and even the male writers should be given a due place in dealing with the feminist issues, and that is I think a right
I
understanding.
think I
Well,
think
man.
here in the audience also we have one feminist writer. I think Professor Dr. Alok Tandon is with
Yes,
us. I think so.
yes,
He
yes, yes.
has written a very good
Yes,
paper recently. Yeah.
yes, yes. I would like to request Dr. Tandon, okay, to comment on Dr. Ojha's paper, and also to give his own views, suggestions. Dr. Tandon. Namaskar, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar, namaskar, Rao Saab. Thank you very much.
Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar, namaskar, ma'am, for your very, I must say, well argued and very balanced presentation on this issue. When you started, I thought that you may go towards the understanding, previous understanding, which you, in your conclusion, you refuted, that this lived experience, and this issue is with the Dalit discourse also, and this runs throughout social philosophy issues, that unless and until you have got the lived experience, you cannot talk authentically about that. I think you have refuted this, and by giving some example, the concrete example of Tagore and Anita Desai. But here I think that we must make certain concessions, because there are certain experiences of women which are not shared by men, especially the biological experience of motherhood. And depiction of those experiences may not be as authentic as maybe done by the women writers. But I think this has got nothing to do with the feminist issue of patriarchy. Once you find that this patriarchy is behind the exploitation of women, then these certain experiences have got uh, not that much of value, I think. And I think that this issue of feminist and feminine is to be distinguished. Unless we distinguish between these two concepts, we may land into some sort of trouble. But I would
Exactly.
suggest you to go into the novels of Sharat Chandra also,
Sarat Chandra.
because Sharat Chandra's novel, especially I may talk about Charitrahina or a Shesha Prashna. Shesh Prashna, the heroine of Shesh Prashna is a, I don't remember her name, but she seems to be a very much liberated woman. So the journey from feminine experiences and their expressions to feminist discourse is to be seen. And it is not necessary that a male writer or a female writer depicting women's agony may automatically turn into a feminist writer. So I think
Exactly.
the feminism you believe in and the feminism of all these writers has to be taken into consideration, and this should be seen even in Hindi writing and in other types of writing in all over India. You correctly said that there is a change, and men writers are also writing from the women perspective. But there may be certain deficiencies. But I
Yes.
totally agree with you that this idea of making a separation between the two is not correct, and it is detrimental to the feminist movement and the success of female liberation, because it will cut off their solidarity with the other exploited people of the world. And we may take example even from the Marx, that he never experienced the alienation of labor in a factory, but all of his writing was in support of that labor class. So I think that man and women both have the capacity to transcend such boundaries, and you have clearly depicted that they have done in the past, and they will do it in the future in a more fruitful way. Thank you very much for presenting a very, very balanced view of the writings. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Tandon, for your views, your suggestions. Well, may I request now Dr. Ranjit Ghosh, sir, to have his observations. Dr. Ghosh.
Namaskar.
Sir, please unmute, sir. Sir, please unmute.
Yeah, I think now I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it is definitely a nice presentation, but from the feministic perspective. But one thing I want to mention here, what Dr. Tandon has mentioned, the transcendence actually plays the important role. You see, men and women, they actually function with the prevalent norms and values of the society in their own sphere. But if somebody transcends that, then only he can feel what the other experiences. So for that reason, knowing others' mind. So a man's knowledge of the women's mind or the women's knowledge of the man's mind, they normally run parallel to each other, but at some time they converge. And when they converge, only when they transcend themselves. So you see, this sort of discussion of feminist literature, feminism, yeah, this in the sphere of philosophy, these are not very old. Because the same misogynist attitude of the male and same patriarchal mentality of the society, these things were there and now is prevalent here and will also prevalent and will also remain in future. So this type of situation, in this type of situation, we can cite some, you see what you have referred about Minal and Bindu. There we find the transcendence, that the Minal can transcend her own self and in such a way that she can resist the existing norms and values of the society. So in here, I would you have referred properly Anita Desai, and but the thing is, as Dr. Tandon says, transcendence is most important. I think this much will do, and you can, since you are on the job of finding out the psychology of the feminists, you can do a better job. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Well, one thing that comes to my mind, well, being born as a male or a female is natural to creation, and we have nothing to do with that. And it is good that male writers are coming up to write on the feminist issues. It's a welcome move. They're trying to understand women and they're taking up the feminist issues. And as Dr. Ojha has also pointed out, that these writings should be welcomed, and because they're trying to understand women. Okay, number one. Number two, there is a point that why should we go with the point that women writers understand women better? Because I just see that women are the greatest enemies of women. How do you see the woman's mindset for a woman? So we should try to understand, because I see that we see that women have a totally a positive framework for women. It's again a question mark at various levels, at the level of homes, at the level of society. You see the woman, okay, how they take the other woman. So that aspect has to be also seen when you totally go with the point that the women writings on women have a better understanding, a clarity than the males reflecting on the woman perspectives. Rather, I feel that side towards the end that you said that the males are coming up with this issue, and I see that the male writings on women are much more neutral and much more, I think, are better than the females writing on the feminist issues. How do you say this, madam? Dr. Ojha. Please unmute, madam. Please unmute, madam. Your microphone. Yes, madam.
Yes. I thought you are just commenting, so I was listening to your voice as a comment, not as a question. So I didn't get any proper question. But this is what I mean to say, that when we see any kind of writing, or especially feminist writing, we should not see it as who has written, whether it is written by male or whether it is written by woman. If a woman is writing, that means that writing is feminist writing, and if a male is writing, that means there is some problem, because male has some other kind of psychological problem. Male are not experienced this woman suffrage. So these prejudice, these what to say, these kind of illusion, if we as a reader have, then we will never be success in understanding the perspective which is coming from all the side. See, a feminist idea is not to separate man and woman. It is something to take both man and woman together. It is about, it should be a humanistic approach. So, if here also we will make a separation, then the separation will go on. Then this kind of diversity, this kind of difference will go on, not only as, yeah, in the form of patriarchy, but also in the form of literature, in the form of philosophy, or wherever it is. So this is how I try to start from the psychology, and then come to how it directly come to the writing, and then from writing how it comes to the reader's mind, and from the reader mind how it has been what to say, it has been spread in the society. So this is how I build up my this paper. So
Okay.
thank you so much for all these comments. Yeah.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Well, the position that you took towards the last and the conclusion that you have reached at is really interesting. As Dr. Ivan Tandon said, that as you started up with a distinction, a clear-cut distinction, that the male writings on women are not encouraging because they don't have lived experiences. There is a fear from the male writers that they will not be taken up seriously by especially women, because they have not gone through the natural experiences that women undergo. But taking all this aside, you have taken a right stance also, and in response, you do feel that that the male writers, we should go beyond the male-female distinction to think about the feminist issues in the writers. Thank you so much, madam. Well, before going to the next speaker, may I request Dr. Pramod Kumar Das to have his observations.
I shall go with Dr. Tandon sir. His comment is wonderful, and also Professor Ghosh said, and you also said. Now you are saying, after listening to Dr. Ojha, you changed your opinion, but your question was very good. My point is, both have limitations. If we suspect that male writers can't write about women, that is a question of skepticism. And when we think about women writers, they may suffer from dogmatism. Okay. So if women will quote women, if women will write about women, there will be no dialectical thought from the opposite side. Then we can't come to a conclusion. We should have to we should have that open mind, because if we say that females are victims, and if we claim that male persons are the cause of that, then we should take their accounts, what they write about females. Dr. Tandon very beautifully said that it will discourage male writers to come forward, because that is not our intention actually. I shall biologically also, when a doctor is treating a woman, he has all experience even about the female biological problems. Psychiatrists also, they study the psychology of a woman. So how can we say that only women can experience women? here I fail to understand. Anyway, this is a very good attempt, and this paper can be developed next time in a better way. Dr. Madam, please you um, um, respect the suggestions of Dr. Tandon and others, and you develop this paper. It is a very good
Sure,
attempt,
sure, sure.
and we shall go to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Professor Das, and so also to thank Dr. Ojha for her responses and the level of confidence that she has in presenting her own opinion. And I should appreciate the comment towards the end, the conclusion that she reached at, that gives a positive response to the male writers. Thank you so much, Dr. Ojha. Well, we have with us Professor Anurima Bhattacharya in the second session.